Greetings everyone and welcome back. We will continue with the topic talent management. Today our focus is on performance management of board directors or board members. Now, candidates, what is performance management? Performance management is a major means by which boards can recognize and correct such corporate governance problems and add real value to the organizations they govern. It is a key component of the performance management system for any board. And it should be noted that a director's contribution to the board should be measured against his duties. A director's contribution to the board should be measured against his duties. All right? Contribution or performance of a director should be measured against his duties. Before a director is appointed, the duties, the responsibilities, his powers must be brought to his or her attention so that periodically evaluation is done to measure actual performance vis-a-vis the duties that are expected of the director. And the nomination candidates for reappointment of a director at the AGM should not be automatic process. It should only occur after a proper evaluation of the performance and the attendance of the director in question. So once a director is appointed, periodically in the annual general meeting, there has to be a report that is tabled at the AGM on the performance of that director, such that if the director is not lived up to expectation, then he should not be reappointed. And evaluation should be led by the chairman through the nominations committee or by an independent service provider. The chair should ensure that directors know that they will be subjected to evaluation, and they should understand the criteria used for evaluation and the evaluation procedures that will be followed, such that a series of evaluation questions are distributed in time for the directors to complete before any meeting with the chairman or the independent service provider. And should a deficiency in a director's performance be identified, a plan should be developed and implemented for the director to acquire the necessary skills or to develop appropriate behavioral patterns. So the director evaluation should be approached in an open, constructive, and non-confrontational manner. And the action plan arising out of the evaluation should be reported to and discussed by the board. Evaluation. Candidates, we are discussing performance management of board members. And we said it's a major means by which boards recognize and correct such corporate governance problems so that value can be added to the organization that they serve. Performance management. And candidates, it should be remembered that the performance evaluation of the board members or the directors' evaluation differs from the board evaluation in several respects, though the evaluation methodology and the processes that are followed could largely be similar. Both the processes have quantitative and qualitative parts questionnaire that are to be responded to, and most likely on a rating scale, followed by interviews. but the parameters of evaluation may differ. Parameters. This will be studying in the topic on board evaluation. There are certain parameters that are to be followed when evaluating the board as a whole. When you are evaluating the chair of the board, there are different parameters to be followed. When evaluating non-executive directors, the parameters are different from when you are evaluating executive directors. And the parameters are different because all these parties perform different roles. Even the independent director's parameters are different. So the methodology may be the same, but the parameters are not the same. The functions that a board chair performs are different from the functions that an independent director performs. So when evaluating both, you have to have different parameters, and that we discuss in detail under the topic board evaluation. The parameters of evaluation differs. So candidates, I want us to proceed and study the process. The board member performance management process. Now, whether this process is administered by the governance committee or by a third party, there ought to be a credible process for evaluating accountability and acting on the information that is comprised of certain steps. And the first step is discover. Discover. No organization candidates can rely on a one-size-fits-all approach. It's important to use what we call a benchmarked set of board member governance competencies as the starting point to identify the appropriate criteria for organization at all three tiers of evaluation. And these benchmarks candidates form the basis to interview the sponsoring group or the board leadership or the governance and nomination committee chairs, the CEO, and also identifying key observations of board performance, including the strategic goals, organization and board culture, the language, the specific organization and industry operating environments, and other factors. So the goal here is that competency expectations aligns with the accepted best practices in corporate governance, with the board's specific culture and goals. And the right conversation can only occur if the right data points are gathered. So the governance committee or some other subset representing governance, like the nominating and development interests, typically oversees the process and approves the competency construct to be applied. So the first step in board member performance management process is to discover the criteria that will be followed in the process. And I'm saying here that it's important to start to benchmark. Benchmarking. It's good to see what is being, how the process is being carried out in the industry, so that you can identify the appropriate criteria. So discover the appropriate criteria that should be followed in board member performance management process. Step number 2, design. Design use the established criteria to design a survey instrument that includes opportunities for quantitative and qualitative feedback. Design survey instrument. And this instrument should be one that enables the provision of feedback that is qualitative and quantitative and qualitative feedback. Because candidates' numbers are important, but numbers never tell the whole story. There ought to be feedback, qualitative feedback. The third step in board member performance management process, number 3, after carrying out the design, is to deploy. Deploy. To deploy is to administer. So administer. Administer the survey using current secure survey technology, making sure to solicit input from directors, from the CEO, from the CEO's direct reports, and other relevant stakeholders. That is just data collection, which may include in-person interviews to gather qualitative information. So when carrying out board member performance management, administer the survey after designing it so that you gather the relevant data. That is feedback about performance of directors. This data can be obtained from reports, from the CEO, from interviews, from other directors, okay, and any other relevant stakeholders. That is step number 3. Then step number 4, share feedback. Share the feedback. And how does that happen? You need to conduct a one-on-one confidential conversation sessions with individual directors to discreetly and respectively share the assessment information. Confidential conversation. And you need to keep the feedback sources anonymous. You need to give the directors feedback of what you've gathered. But that should be done discreetly and respectfully. Focus should be on the specific competency criteria. And you need to work with the director to identify key areas in which they may wish to make behavior adjustments and help them to develop a specific plan to enhance their credibility, to enhance their influence, and also impact with their peers. And that includes helping them identify and improve on their weaknesses, as well as pinpointing the key levers or strengths that they can capitalize on to make their desired changes. And candidates, this stage is particularly well suited to a third-party facilitation. They want to give the shareholders, I mean the board members, this kind of feedback is a third party. Because it is precisely the conversation that boards desire but fear the most. Facing a director, a fellow director, and pinpointing out their weaknesses is not easy. That is what the board chair or other members could avoid. So the best person here to give such feedback is a third party facilitation. And candidate is the linchpin of change in an individual contribution and ultimate board effectiveness. It is a linchpin. It is a what? A linchpin. It is a linchpin of change in an individual contribution and ultimate board effectiveness. And as such, it is crucial to bring the best practices of executive coaching to bear in order to effect the right conversation. That is step number 4. Step number 1, I said you discover the appropriate criteria to carry out evaluation or performance, to evaluate performance. Then you design a survey instrument. This is just a document that will give direction on what kind of questions will be asked. And when carrying out, when designing this document, make sure to factor in qualitative and quantitative aspects of data. Then you deploy or administer the survey. Get information from different sources about a director's performance. Then once you have the information or data about the director's performance, which could be positive or negative, then you share it with the concerned director. And I'm saying here that when you are sharing it, you need to be very careful. You need to do it respectfully and possibly let a third party do the facilitation. Step number 5, report. Report. Now, after sharing feedback with the concerned board members, it's important to report or share the initial findings in a private session with the board leadership. Board leadership. Or the governance committee. All right? Board leadership and also the governance committee. And candidate, there should be a combination of analysis to create a comprehensive overview of the board's current situation as well as to prepare the governance committee for decisions about leadership readiness. Because a scored ranking of all directors within each tiered competency structure gives a bigger picture of the current governance bench. And a table of each director's score by respondent group differentiates how the director resonates with their peers and with the executive leadership. So a leadership readiness, this I'm talking about a leadership readiness ranking. A leadership readiness ranking positioning each director with the consideration to both the qualitative and the quantitative input helps to identify specific evaluations. It also helps to identify the board's collective longitudinal data. Longitudinal data. Longitudinal data. Longitudinal data is just data that is horizontal, collected from the same group. Longitudinal data is data that is collected from the same group. So, candidates, when that is done, candidates, gives board leadership the opportunity to review plans for advancing members' effectiveness and realigning their roles over the 18-year to leverage the contributions at high level. And the board also gathers meaningful data about leadership readiness, about leadership gaps that allow the governance and the nomination committees to function on the basis of facts, on the basis of data, on the basis of peer and other stakeholder input that is non-confrontational. and that is dignified. And therefore, the board can develop potential leaders in a more deliberate and systematic way. So these are the basic board member performance management steps. One, I said, discover the appropriate criteria. Number two, design a survey instrument, which is just a document that will help the evaluator to gather qualitative data and quantitative data. Then number three, deploy or administer the survey. Get the data. This is just data collection. Data, collect the data based on the instrument that is designed in step number two. Step number four, share feedback. This feedback, I've said, should be shared respectively to the concerned board director. All right? Share feedback with the concerned board member. And that has to be done respectively, discreetly. If possible, have a third party to share feedback with the concerned board member. Then step number five, we've said, report to the board leadership in a private session. Other than the board leadership, the findings should also be shared with the governance committee. The governance committee. Governance committee. Then lastly, we've discussed, we said, develop. Develop. I've explained how that is done. You conduct regular evaluations. By conducting regular evaluations, candidates, boards collect longitudinal data about each individual's year-to-year changes. And that gives the board, or the leadership of the board, the opportunity to review plans for advancing members' effectiveness and realigning their roles over their tenure to leverage their contributions at an even higher level. I also say that the board should gather meaningful information or data about leadership readiness, about leadership gaps, about how to allow governance and nominating committees to function on the basis of facts, data, and there also should be peer and other stakeholder input. And that should be done in a manner that is non-confrontational, in a manner that is dignified. When that is done, the board can now develop potential leaders. Develop potential leaders can be developed in a more deliberate and systematic way. So one reason why board member performance management is important is because through all this process, leaders can be developed, and that can help in succession planning. So these are 6 steps in the board member performance management process. Assignment. Outline the board member performance management process. That is your today's assignment. It's based on what we have learned. Thank you for attending this lesson. I hope to meet you in our next session where we continue to learn about boardroom dynamics. Bye-bye.